A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. A desperate, blood-curdling scream echoed across the arid desert night. It came from a time-worn cantina, a weathered sanctuary nestled on the fringe of a modest hamlet at the edge of the dune sea. Within the cantina, the air hung heavy with the pungent scent of stale liquor and the unmistakable coppery tang of fresh blood. Amidst the dim, flickering lights, the subdued cries of the terrified staff and patrons melded into a haunting chorus, their huddled forms cowering on the floor at Burke's feet. A wicked grin crept across his face each time he activated his pain stick. As he twirled the fizzing blue energy weapon in his hands, the electric discharges were reflected in their wide, fearful eyes. How he loved that look of terror on their faces. In this galaxy, you were either the predator or the prey, and Burke was the apex predator here, and it felt good. If only his old slave master back at the quarry could see him now. Not that he could see anything after Burke had gouged out both his eyes. Burke chuckled to himself at the distant memory. He slowly swept the pain stick across the room and pointed it towards his captives, the crackling weapon leaving a trail of dread in its wake. Vance, Burke's brutal accomplice, unleashed a swift kick that connected with a kneeling man as Burke jabbed another with his pain stick. With practiced precision, he found the sweet spot to maximize its effectiveness, and his victim's anguished scream echoed through the cantina, a twisted symphony that made Burke shiver in sadistic pleasure. "Please, please," the cantina owner begged on his knees as he crawled across the cold floor. Burke deactivated the pain stick to cast him a disdainful glare. The portly bar owner, a short, weathered man with a haunted look in his eyes, bore the marks of the thug's brutality. A trail of blood trickled down his face, tracing the path of bruises from the terrible beating he had already endured. But his pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears as Burke reactivated the pain stick again, just to see the despair well in the cantina owner's forlorn eyes. "Take everything you want. Just please, stop." He continued to beg until a vicious strike from Vance sent him sprawling to the floor. "Oh, I plan on taking everything," Burke mocked with a sneer. He ceased his torment, and his gaze swept across the array of bottles behind the counter. Burke reached over and his hand closed around a dusty bottle of Corellian whiskey, its label peeling with age, and a single dirty glass. He set them down on the bar and poured himself a drink of the amber liquid. Then he scanned the room for something else to amuse him. He found it in the form of a pretty Twi'lek girl, hunched under a table. With predatory instinct, Burke seized her by the scruff of her collar, hauled her from her hiding place and slammed her against the bar. His rough hand grazed her leku as he stroked her cheek, and the Twi'lek recoiled from his touch. He brought his face close to hers. "Perhaps I'll start with you," he whispered. Seemingly out of nowhere, a hand silently reached past him. Burke froze, dumbfounded by the newcomer's sudden appearance and close proximity. The shabbily dressed stranger slowly picked up Burke's drink off the bar and nonchalantly shuffled over to an empty table. He sat, with his back turned, and drank. Apparently, he was oblivious to the very obvious fact the cantina was being robbed around him. Recovering from his surprise, Burke wondered how he had gotten past their lookout. "Jur," Burke called out to the third member of their gang. He was supposed to be keeping watch outside, but there was no reply. Had he wandered off? Burke wouldn't put it past him. Like Vance, Jur was in the gang for his muscle and not his brains. Burke released the Twi'lek girl and signaled to Vance to back him up as he came to stand behind the stranger. Draped in dusty brown robes, the stranger looked more like a wandering beggar than a fighter. Probably one of the nomads that traversed the unforgiving sands, Burke thought. Perhaps too much sun had driven him mad. The cantina fell deathly silent as every eye fixated on the mysterious stranger. Burke felt the weight of the room's anticipation and knew that he had to act swiftly to regain control of the situation. "Just who the blazes are you, and what hole did you crawl out from?" Burke's question dripped with suspicion, his narrowed eyes boring into the mysterious figure's back. "Just passing through," the stranger answered simply, without bothering to turn around. Burke's fingers coiled around the stranger's shoulder like a vice, and he squeezed, a silent warning delivered by his tightening grip. "You're playing with fire, stranger. Should have stuck to your corner of the galaxy. You're gonna get burned. You're gonna get burned real bad." "Thanks for the advice, but you might want to remove your hand, unless you're a fan of one-handed living." Burke growled, a guttural rage-filled sound. He let go and nodded to the hulking form of Vance, who drew a wickedly serrated blade from his belt. Everyone in the cantina collectively held their breath for what was about to happen. Vance raised his knife high above his head, ready to plunge it into the stranger's back. But suddenly there was a brief blue flash of cerulean light, and Vance's arm, still holding the weapon in a tight grip, was sent sailing across the room to fall somewhere behind the bar with a soggy thud. Burke staggered back, momentarily stunned, as Vance crumpled to his knees with a scream and clutched at the cauterized stump where his arm had once been. The stranger remained sat and took another sip of his drink. Burke's mind raced to comprehend what had just happened. Coming out of his stupor, he activated his pain stick and lunged at him. But without looking, the stranger suddenly pivoted to the side, and the crackling energy weapon sliced harmlessly through the empty air. Then he took a hold of his chair, and in one seamless motion, he span to his feet and brought the chair up to block Burke's next attack. Burke hit out again and again, but each of his attacks were knocked aside by the old gnarled wooden furniture. With a failed thrust, the pain stick became lodged in the chair's rungs. With a twist, the chair and pain stick spiraled away to clatter to the floor. Burke knew he was outmatched, but that didn't mean the fight was lost. He drew his blaster and brought it up. But before he could pull the trigger, an invisible force pulled it from his grasp. As if possessed, it flew into the stranger's outstretched hand, who span and threw it with all his strength back at Burke. The heavy sidearm smashed him full in the face, with nose breaking force. He tumbled backwards and hit the ground unconscious with an audible gasp from the onlookers. The stranger dusted himself off and finished his drink in a single gulp. "Who are you?" the cantina owner asked, as the stranger turned and helped him up off his knees. "People call me Ben, plain old Ben." By the time the stranger, who called himself Ben, turned his attention to him, Vance's screams of pain had turned to whimpers for his lost appendage. A swift, booted foot descended, and he too joined Burke in darkness.
This would be my scene 1 of Kenobi. I've plotted out a full Kenobi story that I'd like to share. If you'd like to see it or more Star Wars content, then let me know in the comments. And please, please, please subscribe. Thanks.